Good morning, everyone. So when I was here in March, we were celebrating your achievement towards implementing e-voting for listed companies. So I'm delighted to be back here today to discuss the priorities towards the corporate governance roadmap, which was introduced earlier this morning. My comments really come from a global investor perspective, given that the International Corporate Governance Network, the ICGN, which I lead, is comprised of institutional investors from around the world who collectively represent around $34 trillion of assets under management. So the things that are important to our members, as articulated in your roadmap, are the enhancing board functions, promoting shareholder activism, and deepening a corporate governance and CSR culture. So ICGN welcomes the enhancement of independence requirements on boards here in Taiwan. In controlled companies, ICGN advocates that at least 1/3 of the board should be comprised of independent directors, noting, of course, that for companies with widely dispersed ownership models, such as that of the UK or the US, Canada, Australia, our preference is for a majority of independent directors. Independent directors, free from external influence, help offset the domination of decision-making in any single individual and can generate healthy debate around a company's vision, mission and strategy. So this is particularly important when board leadership is not independent, and we really want to avoid decision-making being a ceremonial function in deference to the chairman or the CEO. Constructively challenging management is positively expected of well-functioning boards. On my last visit here, I was told that there wouldn't be many questions from the audience, and in fact I received quite a few questions. One in particular was quite tricky, which was how do we encourage more independent directors to boards of companies here in Taiwan? So key to this is ensuring proper incentives, which relies on what I would call the 4 Ps: protection, pay, prestige, and personal development. Protection is vital to limit the liability of independent directors in the event of corporate failure, and I am pleased to note the new requirement for Taiwanese companies to procure directors and supervisory liability insurance. Pay should be structured to ensure independence, objectivity and alignment with shareholder interests, and is usually linked to company size, roles and commitment. In Europe, in contrast to the US, pay is generally awarded in cash with no variable stock options. Prestige links to personal reputation, arguably the greatest asset for an independent director, and professional development, particularly for first-time independent directors, is a major motivation for joining the board. I should pause to emphasise that board quality is really dependent on board diversity, and for this we really need a combination of skills and experience. This transcends gender and includes ethnicity, social class and cognitive reasoning. Diverse boards are less prone to groupthink and more likely to embrace approaches to meet future company threats and opportunities. I mean, it's now commonplace for companies to publish a board diversity policy. However, many pay lip service to achieving measurable objectives, and disclosure, I am afraid, is woefully boilerplate. Investors are increasingly holding boards to account on this issue. For example, Legal & General, one of the 10 largest index funds in the world, voted against 37 FTSE company chairmen last year in the UK for an inadequate disclosure, and have even introduced a Gender and Leadership Index Fund. Across the Atlantic, the New York City Comptroller, the 4th largest US pension fund, sent letters directly to chairs of nomination committees in 150 companies last year, requesting meetings on diversity, board refreshment and evaluation. The point is, with very few companies disclosing information on how individual director skills connect with the company's strategy and risk profile. Face-to-face dialogue between investors and company directors is vital. Now to refer to your second priority around promoting shareholder rights. It's wonderful to see that there are 91 investors to have become signatories of the Taiwan Stewardship Principles for Institutional Investors. Investors engage with companies to help mitigate risk to their investments on the one hand, while identifying opportunities to help improve long-term performance on the other. The revised European Shareholder Rights Directive requires investors to annually disclose information on their equity investment strategy and how this contributes to the medium and long-term performance of their assets. Most national stewardship codes, such as the one here in Taiwan, call for disclosure of policies around conflicts of interest, voting and company engagement. And while most investors comply with these disclosure obligations, the quality of information from investors is extremely variable. ICGN has just undertaken a review of our own members in terms of their stewardship disclosures, and while we found there were some very good examples, most, if not all, would benefit from improvements. Many policies were too short, generic or out of date and failed to provide evidence of what they're actually doing in terms of stewardship. And this pointer around how to evidence your commitment to stewardship was made by the UK Financial Reporting Council 2 years ago, when they introduced a system to rate the quality of investors and their stewardship code signatories into 2 bands. Now, this tiering methodology has created an incentive for investors to improve their disclosures, and maybe a measure that other markets such as Taiwan might consider in the future. Just a word on voting. There is greater scrutiny around disclosure of voting practices worldwide, particularly if there are vote abstentions or dissent. And an interesting innovation in the UK recently is a public register initiated by the UK government, which names and shames companies that receive more than 20% dissenting votes on any resolution. Monitored by the Investment Association, there are now 120 companies on the list, with 25% increase over the last year. Now, this is largely attributed to more investors voting against individual directors rather than the policies. They're voting for individual directors on issues such as executive pay, diversity and overboarding. To be removed from the list, companies must explain what actions will be taken within 6 months after the dissenting vote and in the next annual report. To the third point around deepening a corporate governance and CSR culture, in 2015, the UN announced 17 goals to end poverty, protect the planet and ensure prosperity for all. In the same year, 195 countries pledged to deal with the effects of climate change by limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees and cut carbon emissions by 45% by 2030. Last week, we were warned by the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that we're not doing enough. In fact, instead of cutting carbon dioxide emissions, world consumption of oil, coal and natural gas is increasing. It is therefore imperative that we deepen corporate governance and a CSR culture if we are to transition to a cleaner economy. To achieve this, we must move towards more resource-efficient business models, embrace renewable energy and smart technologies. We must mobilise private capital towards environmental and social infrastructure to fuel our sustainable growth. Of course, this must be backed up with a regulatory direction to ensure sustainability is factored into our capital market system. For example, an EU action plan was announced in April this year to help link sustainable finance to the real economy, noting that we need around 180 billion euros a year to meet this challenge. That's 6.3 trillion Taiwan new dollars a year. We really need a common language. Companies often take different approaches to ESG disclosures, and investors send mixed signals in terms of their preferences. Now that's perhaps due to multiple reporting standards or just differences in national practices. What is imperative is that we have a deeper understanding of what environmental, social and governance factors actually are, and this includes how systemic issues may affect long-term corporate strategy. For example, how do companies address environmental risks such as climate change, water scarcity or pollution, social risks such as poor human rights or income inequality, or government risks associated with entrenched leadership, executive pay or financial mismanagement? To conclude, I can see the time's up sign. Thank you. We started late. We really need to speed dial the extent to which companies and investors are incorporating ESG factors into their decision making. This requires a cross-generational perspective to minimize risks that could impact returns for young and old beneficiaries. A focus only on the short term may result in unintended consequences, which can undermine future performance and emerge as material liabilities to the company or to society. We can only achieve this if sustainability and governance is hardwired into the global financial system. This must be backed up by regulation requiring adequate disclosure and a strong enforcement regime. Getting it right is crucial to meet our collective need for sustainable value creation upon which future generations depend. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rory. Please take your seat. 接下来呢，我们要欢迎的是第一位与谈人上台简报，中华公司治理协会的刘文正理事长。Please welcome our first panelist, Ms. Bensenville, Chairman of Taiwan Corporate Governance Association, to give his presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Chairman Liu.
各位先进，尤其是国外来的先进朋友，大家好。好。本人很高兴呢，今天来参加这样的一个论坛。我们这一部分呢，我们需要谈的是公司治理生态。那我先借用早上那个我们副院长有谈到，就是 CG Watch 2016，这个呢就是 CG Watch 2016的一个封面，讲到一个生态，公司治理生态。这里面有几个重要的 message。第一个呢，就是说生态呢，它是相当重要的。第二个呢，就是生态的健全不健全呢，会导致未来公司治理是不是有效。那第三个呢，因为整个生态系统是由不同的 subsystem 来构成，所以呢，这各个 subsystem 之间呢，它的有效的沟通呢，对于公司治理的一个整个提升是有注意的。早上我们副院长也谈到 CG Watch 我们台湾的一个排名。那过去几年，各位跟我一样可以感觉到，台湾的公司治理整个来说是有进步的，是有进步的。所以呢，我们呢就是在这里的排名来讲呢，就是说我们从过去的第6名进步到第4名。那这里我要提了一点，特别提了一点，就是最后一栏，各位可以看一下所谓的 CG Culture 这一部分，我们得分是50分，跟我们的总分的分数60分差了10分，所以呢这一点呢就是说比较弱的部分。但是文化的部分呢，弱的部分呢，也不是光台湾是这个样子，我想这个是所有的亚洲市场一个共通的一个现象。所以呢，这一章要告诉我们，就是说整个文化我们是需要迎头赶上，是要再加紧脚步的。过去因为大家谈，我们都是一个所谓的 regulation driven 的 market， 那事实上，公司治理不是光法规而已，它是自治事项。我们公司呢，自己呢是可以采取很多比较先进的一个做法，来领先同业。那因为法规呢，它是常常是一个 compromise， 就是很多的一个团体 compromise 的一个产物，它是一个最低标准，它是一个地板，不是一个天花板啊。那这张呢，因为早上秀过了。那这一张我特别要提的就是我们看右边这个我们 highlight 出来这一部分呢，目前来讲，过去几年我们有很多进步，但是呢，就说现在来讲，从这个亚洲公司治理协会 ACGA 来看呢，他说我们是有 form，the form is in now need the substance， 所以说我们这个形式样子是有了，那我们现在呢需要加强这个内涵的一个充实。好，2016，我想今年是2018。根据 ACGA 的一个惯例，它大概每2年就会出版一个 CG Watch 这样的概念。2018很快就要出来了。那2016的部分，我们是60分，第4名。那2018我们会是怎么样呢？那因为2018还没有结束啊，那我也不知道。那这个要看是我们有进步，那问题是说别的市场也有进步。那重要是说我们进步是不是比人家快一点？所以常常讲说啊，我虽然是 moving forward but too slowly， 过去就是说你是向前，但是可能是太慢，但被人家赶过以后你就退步了。好，那我想这一章我是要表示的就是也是echo 这个早上呢副院长所谈的，事实上我们台湾整个过去几年的进步，这个动势，这个 momentum 还是在继续 upward。这是2017年的几个统计资料，各位可以看一下，在中间像是独立董事或是审计委员会这样的一个设置，早上副院长也谈过，我们目前已经超过800，可能到年底就超将近1000这样的一个数目。那未来所有的公司都会有所谓的审计委员会这样的一个设置哦。好，那生态系统，因为我想我们台湾市场跟其他市场一样，因为有一些 subsystem 来构成。那我想从中间呢，我们从来谈起。中间这个地方呢，台湾有1600家上市柜公司。那上市柜公司，当然它有里面的董事会，它有里面的经营阶层。那呢，在这个右下角这个地方呢，它有各个不同的 stakeholder。那这个不光限于机构投资人哦，还有很多人哦。这个再来呢，我们再往右看，因为台湾也有一个非常活跃的媒体。就 media N 加，我不知道多少啊，这个非常多，所以他也在做一些媒体应该做的工作。在我们再让左上角看，有个金管会，金管会。再下来呢，可能我们有证交所，我们有 OTC， 还有我们其他的中介机构。那再来呢，就是我们的左下角这里呢，我们有一些 NPO、NGO 这些机构。那在右上角这一部分呢，当然我们还有一个最后 legal enforcement 这个法律的一个系统。当然这个社会非常不满意，但今天我不会谈太多这个部分啊。那今天呢，我想我把这个系统呢，台湾系统比较特殊的部分，举个几点来跟各位来分享。那这个红色的部分呢，就是我个人认为台湾的这个 ecosystem 比较特殊的部分。当然呢，我们像这个证券跟期货，这个我们叫证基会基金会呢，它也扮演了一定的角色。它在董事进修，在这个公司治理这个研究方面呢，它也做了很多，但是它的范围比较广，我这边就没有特殊来提出来。另外，我们台湾还有一个董事学会，因为它做的是比较就是在于家族传承、接班传承这样方面的工作，所以我把它列上来，但是没有用红色来表示。那接着呢，我就让我花一点时间来把这3个机构给各位做个介绍。那第一个就是公司治理中心，这个是在2012年成立的，那是根据2013年、17年的所谓的我们第1版公司治理蓝图，它的就是愿景，就是希望来建造这个公司治理文化。同时呢，来创造就是相互间的价值是它的一个 vision 那当然，它最重要就是在整合公司治理生态系统的一个 不同的一个资源跟 resources 哦。那所以我可以说啊，我们现在公司治理中心它是under在交易所，但事实上它参加的机构非常的多，它是一个我们台湾呢在整个生态系统的一个协调协和的一个中心。那第二个我要谈的就是所谓的我们的这个投资人证券交易人跟期货交易人保护中心，那简称投保中心。这个组织呢在台湾是一个很特殊的，它是2003年设立的，它主要的目的就是保护投资人，所以呢它是提供投资人一些咨询，那它一些仲裁，同时呢它可以提出一些团体诉讼，这个在台湾呢这个机构是比较特殊，所以在整个台湾的一个生态系统来讲算是加分的。接着呢让我谈一下公司治理协会。那公司治理协会呢，它是一个 NGO 的一个组织，它是在2002年成立，差不多跟我们台湾在倡议公司治理那个同时来创立的。它主要做很多的专业服务工作，那比如说董事会的一个进修，董事的进修，还有公司治理制度评量、董事会效能的评估，还有做一些研究出版这样的一个情况。好，所以呢，目前来讲，台湾整个社会呢有3个主要的一个 assessment 的一个系统。那右下角这里就是全面评鉴，这个是所有的上市公司都要做。那左上角这里就是所谓公司治理协会所做的公司治理制度评量，这个呢已经大概10几年了，目前呢大概也有100多家上市公司呢来做这个事情。右下角这一块就是董事会效能评估。这个，我想这个除了公司治理协会，还有很多机构在做。目前公司治理协会到今年年底呢，应该也做了20家，会做20家。这个是前面大概前5% 的公司这样做。好，讲到这里呢，就他们在提醒我时间快到了哈。那我想最重要的就是这一章。刚刚早上，不管是我们主委或是副院长都有提到我们新的公司治理蓝图。那以我个人的一个经验，我想第一，我们现在会进步，那个第1版的公司治理蓝图扮演一个很重要的一个角色，一个引导的角色。那我想未来3年这个第2版的公司治理这个蓝图呢，也会扮演一个很重要的主导角色。那我在想，我们在座很多都是公司的独立董事，我们怎么样？因为我刚刚讲公司治理是一个自治事项。我们怎么样在蓝图之外还可以想一些什么事情来做？那我这边呢提出10个点。那10个点左上角有5个点，因为这5个点呢跟这个一些我们的一个监理机关或者它的外围单位是有点关系，他们需要点努力。那左下角2点，右下角2点，这个纯粹公司是可以做的。让我从右下角第1点来讲，这个董事，因为公司治理中心在董事会。所以董事会的组成是最重要，你怎么选董事的原料，这个非常重要。我们谈到专业性、独立性，还有一个很重要的适任性。那适任性呢，这个呢，就让我谈到说，2个非常杰出的个人或是团体是不一定会结合不一定会幸福的，这个大家了解这一点。所以适任性这个东西需要一点 taste， 需要一点 match， 需要一点时间。所以呢，这一点呢是格外重要。这个就link到左上角的第2点。就是我们这里谈的，就是希望呢能够 promote 这独立董事的这种 engagement practice， 先约会一下，先了解一下，选一个独立董事是多么重要的事情双方来讲，所以需要有这个 engagement， 跟国外像英国这种 practice 又比较好的一个 engage period。那这个东西呢，所以这个东西需要去鼓励，甚至在 engage 完呢，应该是要就是把双方的互相的期待。把书面下来，把它 written 下来，这个对我们文化来讲是非常重要的。就是说，你期望我做什么，那我可以做什么，那我得到是什么样的 incentive 或是报酬这样的概念。好，那再来就是右下角，回到右下角，就是我们在座呢，事实上我说领先，我们可以把蓝图刚刚谈了很多公司治理它的重要 CSR、ESG 或是联合国这种概念呢，怎么样把它放到我们公司的一个愿景尤其永续经营的愿景这个就是右下角第2点。那右下角第3点讲到沟通这个因为我没有太多时间再谈了，这个非常重要，因为在现今来讲 communication 非常重要。再让我就移到左上角这个第1点，就差异管理。 那目前来讲，我们基本上是有差异管理，是有资本额100亿、50亿、20亿这样概念。但是我这里讲的是 modern law， 是不是可以有 carrot stick， 就是说有处罚，就是说对于比较好、比较优秀、连续的话，有一点弹性给他，有一点弹性，让他来提高营运的一个效率。这是我讲的这个所谓的一个不同的管理规则给不同的公司。好。再来第4个就是我刚才也谈到，就是第4个就是 independence 的 definition。那我们现在的定义对独立性有好有坏，有些太严，有些太松。那我刚刚讲的就是说，你为了要选好的董事，你需要去 engage。那 engage 以后呢，又独立 engage 可能是透过咨询或者顾问这个方式，但是我们现在的规范太严，就是说你1块钱都不行，你过去2年你有业务关系1块钱都不行。所以可不可以仿照美国或是比较其他国家呢？就是说它有个 materiality 重大性这种概念哦，比如说50万美金，50万台币不是美金，太大了哦，50万台币不超过都算独立性哦，这样的一个概念。再来最后一项就左上角这个虽然的 last 但不是 list， 就是 BJR 就是商业判断原则的一个应用，可不可以来提倡？由金管会这边或外围单位来提倡说我是 support， 因为我们现在法院系统可能有一半法官 support 这个，有一半法官没有，那我们也做了很多努力。还有一个呢，既然商业判断原则，我们可不可以也来列一下，就是所谓独立董事的行为准则？我需要有那个 professional code 是什么东西？好，那因为时间关系呢，我左下角各位看就晓。那我重要的一点就是说，这些项目列在这里，自治事项10项，当然左上角5项是需要就是监管机关一点努力，但是其实7项或是8项，我们公司呢，我们董事都可以来带头前进，来领导公司前进。那等一下呢，如果各位还有我们可以有一段时间可以互相交流。我的报告到这里为止，谢谢。
谢谢刘文正理事长，请理事长先回座 ，Thank you。接下来呢，我们要欢迎的第2位语坛人是泰国证管会的代表。Next, we would like to welcome our second panelist, Ms. Waracha Srimachan. She's the Senior Assistant Secretary General of Securities and Exchange Commission of Thailand. Ladies and gentlemen, please give her a warm welcome.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to thank the FSC very much for inviting me to join this prestigious conference. We have been sending our people to this conference every year, and this is well known, at least in Thailand. Well, today I'd like to share with you what we, as a Thai regulator, have been developed the ecosystem in developing city in Thailand. Again, like the SSCC, this is what my personal experience. It doesn't have to represent the SEC as a whole, and especially just the Thai SEC, not the US SEC or the FSC or anyone else. So it's just a Thai regulator and my own experience. And my over 25 years working at the SEC have been working with the corporate governance in one way or another in every department, for corporate issuance, enforcement, monitoring, policy development, CG development, and now this is SEC governance ourselves, and this is the most difficult part, I guess. So I share with you the difficulty in going through this journey. So how do I move the slide? So before I start, let me ask you, what I found in my over 20 years experience is that when I talk about good governance, it means so different things to different people. And it changed over time. So if we look at this, I'll show you these two pictures. What you think is more resemble to what corporates are facing at the moment. This picture, which is boat race between the Oxford and Cambridge on the Thames River in London, or this one, a kayak team going through whitewater rafting. which is closer to what corporates are facing today? The first or the second? You don't need to use e-voting. Just raise a hand. Who think that it is one? Please raise your hand. None. So one person. And who think that this is two? This picture is closer. So we agree that this is closer to what we're at the moment. Right. So right now, corporates are facing with the VUCA world, with the fast changing of technology. With the fast changing of technology, so when in this type, the good means different things over time. If the first one, the river flows a bit slowly, so when we first set up the SEC, the Chao Phraya River also flows just about the same speed as the Thames. So as a regulator, we could not regulate for the good, we just weeded out the bad. So when we say that good governance, that means not harming the others, or not bad, or not our customers. Those are good people. And then even before the word corporate governance was introduced. And then when we started to have too many customers, and that it comes to times when the Enron WorldCom cases, at the same time as the Thai crisis as well, we introduced corporate governance to build confidence in the companies. And for that, the good, we means that good check and balance with independent directors, good oversight, with accountability, transparency, and all those kind of things. And then we also see that in order for the river to flow, that we still have the river, and we can achieve our aims. Being good to shareholders is not enough. We just have to be good to stakeholders as well. Otherwise, we can't survive. So it's good for me and responsible for others. And then, in this world of changes, of disruption, you can see that companies like Nokia, Kodak, they did nothing wrong, but still they couldn't survive because they couldn't change that fast. So, in order to be sustainable, being responsible doesn't mean that they can be sustainable. Then they have to move fast. The resilience, having agility to adapt their strategy to the new changes is also very vital to the companies. So, if the good differs over time, then the governance or what governs people's behavior also have to change. When in this picture, you know which direction the boat is going. To your right or to your left? To the right, right? So the boat is going to the right. That means everyone in the troop is turning their back on their goal. It's the only person who is facing the direction that the company is going is this gentleman. Is the gentleman in front. So this can be done if it doesn't change that much. Wow, 3 minutes left. If it doesn't change that much, so what we focus is on the tone from the top and having good oversight so that the troops going to the right direction, is the fastest way. So by doing this, when we put in the CG principle, we have all the CG principles that the tone from the top with good respect of shareholders' right, equitable treatment, all those things. And then we have the problem that we have seen so much development. We have good IODs, we have good ratings, we have seen so much improvement over the years. And we are, when we do the ASEAN CG scorecard, we also rank very well. But then it comes to the problem that, is it a good just in the form or in substance? Because if you look at this picture in another perspective, it can also mean that we are asking the rest of the troops are like corporate director. We are asking them to do the oversight, to look back and be accountable for what they've been doing and follow the SEC who is in the front. That is the Thai SEC. as the CCC, we put down the tone from the top to corporates on what they should do. We write down rules. We ask them to do this and that. We design for the ratings and everything. That's more of the top-down approach of development. But in the world that moves so fast, every board has to go on its own. Decision cannot be made at the top of the company. So the governance, the tone from the top is just not enough. It has to be tone from the top, tap in the middle, tune in the middle, and tap at the feet as well to make sure that people in the field can make the right decision. And if they make wrong decision, that bad reputation will spread out very fast through the social mobile network or whatsoever. So it's very important. So what drives people? If you want to move people in the bottom to move, so the board cannot just be tone from the top, but also have to ensure that they have good mechanism to drive people, even at every unit of their people. So what really drive people are the goal, the purpose, the objectives. If we can't put the governance, responsible, ESG into their business, then they're not going to do it. So what moves people best is the goal. Everyone wants to be successful, and also the risk management, the KPI. People want to be rewarded, want to be incentivized. So we need to make sure that compensation also are in that place. Innovation is very important. IT and then cybersecurity is also very important. And last but not least, oversight is still there. Building confidence is always very important. So what the key board's function role is not just to do the oversight. They have to lead with the management to ensure that the companies are going to the right direction. So what governs people should lead to value creation of the company. And for that, we mean by governance, which is to arrange for governance. For us now, it means arrangement to govern behaviors of people in the organization to achieve the objectives. It's just for the whole organization. And the objective has to be good for everyone. So with the different types of good, different types of governance to meet the different, the new changes, so that practices, the mechanism to drive good system, good CG practice have to differ. So enforcement has to be there. It has to be there. But the role of the companies to build their own self-discipline is important. So once they see that it is their business, it is important to their business, they have the more incentive to do it. And the disclosure will be important. Instead of disclosing things like what to do, they should disclose more of the stories. And what is very important is on the ecosystem, like the investors. We also have the stewardship code in Thailand, so that the institutional investor can play their roles, and as well as the professionals like the IODs, the financial advisor, investor association, journalists. Those are very important ecosystem. I'm sorry I couldn't go through that more. I go through that more into in the discussion, and let's see. But the corporate governance is a journey, and it is important for the sustainability of the company. It's not for the regulators, because business are built for business. It's not built for regulators. So, but you cannot achieve without having good governance in place to achieve your goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Srimathan. Thank you. 接下来呢，我们邀请的是第3位与谈人，贝莱德证券投资信托公司的执行董事。Next, please welcome Mr. Leo Seawald, Managing Director, Chairman, and Country Head of BlackRock Investment Management Taiwan. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Mr. Seawald.
各位长官、女士们、亲戚们，早上好。是我的荣幸，今天代表贝莱德给你们分享我们的看法关于 corporate governance. This is actually one of my favorite subjects, so I'm really pleased and honored to have the opportunity to talk about corporate governance today. Before we get started with the panel discussion, I thought it might be useful to talk a little bit about
what our perspective is as an asset manager, and it's a little bit different from some of the other talks you had. BlackRock, as many of you know, is one of the largest asset, or the largest asset manager in the world. We manage currently over $6 trillion US. So when you look at most public companies on the largest stock exchanges in the world, we own them, a part of them. So corporate governance to us is something very, very important. I also think it's interesting to have the opportunity to talk about corporate governance today because of the market volatility that we've been seeing, and particularly in the last few weeks, the very strong downturn. Because if you're not able to demonstrate a company's value when markets are tumbling, you're going to have a problem. And when markets are down, you need to have people to trust that you have the strategy and the people to weather these volatile markets. So corporate governance becomes particularly important at times like this. The key is to show long-term value. Corporate governance is an evolving process, and we've heard that this morning also from Vice Premier Shi. It started out a long time ago being about transparency and protecting minority shareholders. It moved into more long-termism, and most recently, in the last number of years, you hear an increasing discussion about sustainability and the long-term viability of a business. And I think you'll hear more and more about that today, because I think that's the direction we're all heading into, and I'll also talk a little bit about that. For BlackRock in particular, because of that $6.3 trillion we manage, most of that is long-term money. It's pension money, it's insurance money, it's money that we hold for a long time. So we invest for a long time, and because of that, we need to make sure that companies are going to be around for a long time. We believe that only business that run a sustainable model will be successful in the long term, and that's why corporate governance and stewardship is so important to us. So let's take a little bit of a look at how we approach that in. So, as a large investor, ensuring good stewardship is not about checking boxes. And I think in Asia, in many cases, corporate governance in particular is still a little bit too much about checking the boxes. Do I have the right number of independent directors? Am I disclosing the things I need to disclose from a regulatory requirement? But that's not what it is for us. So for us, we look at our involvement in stewardship in three basic ways. The first is engagement, so to directly engage with companies. That means we actually look at whether a company has proper succession planning. That's particularly important in Taiwan, where we have so many SMEs where they're on to the second and in sometimes first or second generation, and they're looking for ways to pass it on to the third generation. We look at remuneration of boards. We look at board structure. Are there enough independent directors, and do the independent directors meet the needs that the company has? And are there related party transactions that are problematic? We saw this morning that that's a big concern for a lot of the people in this room, and we agree. Finally, are the plans of the company well articulated? And I think this is an area where Taiwan in particular and Asia in particular need to go a little bit more in the direction of articulating the corporate plans and demonstrating that sustainability factor that we talked about. The second element is the voting issue that you can see. Voting to us is really the most basic requirement. It's just a requirement that every asset manager should do, and it's a way to make sure that we're protecting the interests of the people we represent. Finally, the third part is the engagement on policy issues. And that has to do with education, that has to do with working with regulators and industry associations to develop best practices on corporate governance. One of the things that we're particularly interested in nowadays is diversity on the board of directors, and I'll talk about that probably more in the panel. But I think that's a very key issue that we think is important to showing that companies have a long-term sustainable business model. We want to have a recognition that stewardship or corporate governance is an issue in the heart, it's not in the mind. Unless you really believe that corporate governance and good stewardship is good for your company, you won't do it properly. If all you believe it's a bunch of boxes to check, you will fail, and the work we do with you will eventually draw that out in other investors such as ourselves. So we really want to see that you really believe and embrace it as a corporate. let's take a little bit a look at the ecosystem. At the first part, you have the asset owners, and I'll distinguish those from the business owners. Asset owners to us are the pension companies, the sovereign wealth funds, and those type of and insurance companies, those type of large asset owners who hold the value on behalf of their clients. And these type of constituents are becoming increasingly important in the investment ecosystem because they're starting to tell us, their managers, on what they want us to look for and how they want us to manage their money in light of the companies they work in. So I think asset owners in that sense, where in the past were just passive, are becoming more and more involved in the process, particularly if you look at like the Japan Post. They really challenge their asset managers to go in and engage with companies very actively. And only based on the engagement that you have with the companies that they invest in are you going to be given the ability to manage money for them. That's a key criteria. I don't think for the asset managers, I think it's quite clear. I'll go through more of our perspective from that. The third one I talk about is the index providers. So we've talked a little bit about that, but even if all you do is manage an index fund, at the least, governance is still an important issue. BlackRock, for example, owns a lot of companies, has stakes in a lot of companies that wouldn't meet any ESG requirements, ES requirements. For example, weapons industry and tobacco. We own them because they're part of indexes. But that doesn't mean that the governance portion isn't relevant to us. And index and proxy providers can make sure that companies fulfill their requirements even within that confined space where they're in industries that don't meet the E and S requirements that easily. We still want to see how they're managing that. Next, just a quick look at the team capabilities that we have. I think the only one I'm going to talk about here is the analyzing, because what we do in this case is we look at the factors that are important to a particular company. What analyzing means is that we're looking for the strategy that the company has that makes it sustainable in the long term. For example, if you run a bank, we want to make sure that you have proper AML requirements in it. You're investing systems to protect against cybersecurity. If you're running a bottling company, there was a case a few years ago where a large bottling manufacturer in India was using all the water in the city so that the residents didn't have anything to drink. Well, obviously, if that's the case, you're not very sustainable. So we'd be looking at situations like that. If you're in the oil and gas industry, we want to see, or if you're heavy users of fossil fuels, we want to see what you're doing to cut your carbon footprint, to make yourself sustainable in the long run. So the analyzing process is that. The engaging, the voting, and the participating are things I just talked about before. This is just a description of our team, and I think that BlackRock puts a lot of money and effort into our team of people who go through these procedures. We have people located in 7 different locations globally and 33 individuals. I think must be one of the largest for any asset manager. In terms of the process, I'll just describe it very quickly. And if you see that BIS, that stands for our BlackRock Investment Stewardship Team. So every time we get a notice for a meeting, we'll begin by cataloging it, and then we'll start to analyze it on the criteria I just said. If you go to the third point under the column, the first column, I don't know if it, how do I go back? So we will apply our internal guidelines. And these guidelines are more of a set of expectations. They're not really something you can check boxes on. They're a set of expectations. So we want to see companies that meet those expectations rather than anything else. And only when companies do not meet when we get a meeting notice, only when we notice that they don't, when there's issues that don't fall into the criteria that we like, we then go into engage with the companies. Very quickly, the next one, the last crucial slide, this is my favorite slide, is just to talk about the extent of engagement that BlackRock has. And you can see that in Asia and ex-Japan, we vote in 6,000 meetings every year. And we vote on over 53,000 proposals. The key thing I want to say here is that we do not toe the company line, and that's very important. In most cases, we follow the management recommendations, but in a significant number, we do not. So we will vote against the management in 36% of the cases in Asia, and that's something to take note of. Finally, I'll just skip to the next one because time is running out. I want to let everyone know that the information that how we judge companies and how we look at companies before we vote is very clearly laid out on our website. All the information is there. You can look it out, including our company guidelines, our case studies. It's all there, so you can please take a look at that. It'll give you a better idea. I look forward to addressing more questions to you in the question section, and I put our disclaimer at the very end for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Mr. Sewell. Thank you. Please take your seat. 接下来呢，我们要欢迎的是第4位与谈人，香港保监会的蒲伟光执行董事。Please welcome our next panelist, Mr. Stephen Poe, Executive Director of Market Conduct of Insurance Authority from Hong Kong. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Mr. Poe.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's really my pleasure to be here. And more importantly, I know I'm standing between you and the lunch. So I'll do whatever my best to keep my presentation concise and also interesting as much as possible. You see my title. I'm currently a regulator in the insurance sectors. Before that, I've been the regulator in the security sectors, in fact, for more than 25 years. I've been deeply involved in the IOSCO's work. So later on, you will find that whatever I say suddenly or unconsciously will be channeled back to my securities experience. So apologies for that. As usual, what I try to do today is I will share some past experience. I will call the insurance sector's experience with you, scale you up, make you wake up, and then come up with some of the current international requirements on the corporate governance. And finally, some of my personal views on the effectiveness of all these corporate requirements and any further work that we need to be done in the futures. And of course, later on in the Q&A sections, welcome any comments, wishes, or any suggestions you want to raise. So I'll start with my first sharing of the experience. The first company I'm going to talk about is called Equitable Life Insurance Society, which collapsed in the year 2000. This was a very old UK insurance company established in 1762, so about 250 years ago. Basically, this life company sold a product called With Profit. For those who are not in the insurance sectors, With Profit life insurance products basically is a product for retirement in the future. And in the Article 65 of the Insurers Articles of Association, it is stated that the directors could, at their discretion, vary bonuses, and the company rely on that Article of Association since its foundation. Then, in 1998, when the company's directors declared that they would like to reduce the terminal bonus to be paid to the policyholders by relying on these sections, some of the policyholders took it to the court. And finally, the House of Lords, this is the final court parties in UK systems, unanimously agreed that there was an implied term in the Articles of Association that the directors could not exercise their discretion in the way they had because it defeated the reasonable expectations of the policyholders. The reason is very simple, because the company set out the expect bonuses to be paid in their notices, and these notices have been sent to the policyholders. So it was decided by the final court that the directors cannot make the changes themselves. If this is not scary enough to those dear directors sitting in this room, let me go to the next one, HIH, which is an Australian insurance company. It collapsed in the year 2001. This, in fact, is the second largest failure of the insurance companies in its history. The court sentenced one director to a 4.5 years in prison in year 2005. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you are directors and you have been daydreaming for the last 1 hour, please listen to me for just 1 minute. The court basically found that the directors failed on a number of issues. The one of it is about the disseminating of the information, knowing it was forced. Also obtaining personal benefits by using this information. And finally, the most important bit is the court found that the directors intentionally dishonest and failing to discharge his duties as a director in a good faith and in the best interest of the company. So the key message to all the directors is that you do carry personal liabilities. You fail in discharging your job as a proper director. And the final experience, I don't need to go further. We are now 10 years after the global financial crisis. I remember very, very hard about all the efforts we made in saving the world at that point in time. And AIG was part of it because of a lot of the guarantee on the CDS, because AIG at that point in time was AAA rated. So lent the AAA rating to a number of the CDS issued by other financial advisors. So that indicates a possible failure in the risk management. Ever since the financial crisis in 2008, the G20 ministers put a lot of effort in reforming all the regulations on a global basis. Financial Stability Board was basically tasked with the duty of setting the international regulations. And then for those areas related to banking side, Basel Committee pick it up. Those involved on the security side, the IOSCOs, is the chief standard setters. And as far as for the insurance side, IIS, International Associations of the Insurance Regulators, is the principal regulatory setting bodies. And now IIS has more than 200 members. It set out quite a number of the principles. All of them are called ICP, the Insurance Core Principles. I just want to explain two major ones with you, give you a favor about what the work. I got a PowerPoint with you, and I got my speaking note that would be enough for me for 2 hours. But I just want to cover a few key points. The first one I want to talk about would be on the third bullet point, the allocations and the roles and the management responsibilities. The key concerns we do have is we do expect all these board members' compositions do not have any undue concentration of powers. We talk about a lot of diversity of the board members, but in reality, no matter how many people is there, we always see the possible problem is that there's a concentration of powers. Only one or two speak, and one or two make the final decisions. So the main concern is about there's no undue concentration of powers. And then for the individual board members, of course, you are expected to act in a good faith, exercise due care, etc., etc. So I don't go into details on this PowerPoint. The next major core principles that the regulators have put out is about the internal controls on the risk management. because we are the regulators on the financial institutions that cover both the insurance companies, banks, or even securities houses. So our focus is always on the risk management and internal controls. And that core principles basically set out that it is the role and the responsibilities of the board to set out a very effective systems of risk management and controls in order to address all the keys these FIs are facing right now. And on this, just want to pick up one area I want to mention. It's about the second bullet point, risk culture. Very seldom to hear people talk about risk cultures. We hear more about corporate cultures. But being a financial institutions, we do expect the firms establish a forward-looking risk profile. And then they need to carry out, at least on an annual basis, a review on all these risks to see whether there's any potential risk that has not been identified. And if there's any potential risk come up, what would be the responses? What sort of additional work the firm, the FI need to be carried out? And also finally, one thing probably more relevant in the financial sectors is about the remuneration arrangement, about the incentive structures. Over the last 10 years, when we analyze all these financial failures or misbehaviors, it's all linked to one thing. It's about the remuneration behavior. How you remunerate people, how you reward the traders. Certain extents lead your traders or your senior management to behave in a particular way. So the risk profile is another thing that we are concerned. The other things concerned is about the outsourcing. We all are living in a one global village. Many of the functions are no longer just carried out in your domestic market. It has been chopped, sliced, and has been carried out in different parts of the world. So outsourcing of the functions is something is normal, which is accepted by many regulators. But the final word of recommendation is that you can outsource the functions, but you cannot outsource your responsibilities. It is at the end, it's the ultimate responsibilities of the board to see that there's sufficient controls on all these outstanding functions. This is the Hong Kong regulations on the insurers. I don't go into the details, but one point I just want to mention is that in Hong Kong, not only the CEO need to be approved by the regulators, but in varieties, all the directors, controllers, and also the key persons in control. This is our new terms. Key person controls means all the people carrying out the risk management, internal controls, compliance functions need also to be approved by the regulators. Simple chart, basically, this is a chart saying that all this work need to be done by everyone working together. Now come to my last bit of my presentation, some of my personal observations on the issues about the corporate governance. The first one is about the board composition. We heard some of the panelists talk about the diversities of the board members. For example, like Benjamin talked about when two gentlemen work together, does not necessarily have the right chemistry mix. That's all true. But more than that, there's one important message I want to bring it up is, when we look at all these board members on an individual basis, they all have very good credentials. They're either lawyers, accountants, regulators, or industry expertise. But seldomly, they do have the detailed working experience in the area of the business that they are on. So one of the challenges is that when there's a discussions at the board level, the independent non-executive directors wouldn't have the right level of the knowledge, experience to challenge the executive directors on all the recommendations put up. So more than just professional qualifications, the right levels of the experience is also necessary on that. So on that basis, that probably linked to the final bullet point is access to the resources and adequate board powers. In case if the board members do not have that level of the technical know-how, definitely the board should be empowered to engage the appropriate consultant to provide all sorts of the technical know-how so that the board members will be able to do the job they are asked to do. This is a very common PowerPoint. It shows about all the committees that you are very familiar with. There are only two messages I want to bring it up. One is that there should be a good rotations of the members within the committees. It is not a good practice have someone stay in the same committees for a long period of time, say for example more than 9 years. The second message is that, again, the board can set up all sorts of the committees, but at the end of the day, it's still the ultimately the board will carry all the responsibilities. Can't say that the task has been passed to one of the committee. The board will be ultimately held liable. This PowerPoint has just one key message. In fact, it's on the first bullet point. The board should understand the control environment. It is very common. The board member says that we have recruited the CEO, we have recruited the CCO, we got all sorts of the compliance and legal people is there. But still, it is the board members' duties to understand the control environments you are in so that you will be able to judge whether all your senior managers have been discharging their functions properly. I know I run out of time, but I still want to borrow a few more minutes to talk about the corporate culture, which I see this is the most important point. Corporate culture basically reflects the fundamental corporate values and norms for responsible and ethical behavior applicable to all employees in the insurers. The board should take the lead in setting the appropriate tone at the top. On top of that, the board should also walk what they talk. There should be an actual implementations on all these cultures they talk about. So in that sense, the board should also ensure that the firms have the appropriate corporate governance framework and make sure that all these systems have been checked at least on an annual basis to see all the designed corporate cultures and values will be really filtered down to the working levels. And more importantly, the board shouldn't pardon any employees whose misbehavior is totally opposite to the corporate value and norms promulgated by the board. And finally, the board should encourage all the staff to have a very open and frank dialogue with either the senior management or the board members. And finally, as a regulators, definitely we see that the regulators have a very important role to play in promoting the corporate governance. So we do expect, definitely the supervisors will check the compliance of all these proposals. But one thing I just want to emphasize is the communication. It is very important for the firms to have an open and frank dialogue with the regulators on all these issues. This is my final point, and I probably don't need to go into detail explaining all this. You can read it from the PowerPoint. But in order to sum up what I just present to you, I just have 3 key messages for you to take home. One is, it is very important for the firm, in particular for the board, to establish your own corporate culture, corporate value. And second, your control functions must be effective. There must be a regular review to make sure that whatever policies put down in paper will be and actually has been implemented. And finally, nothing more important than open communication with all the stakeholders. including your shareholders, and very importantly, being a regulator with your regulator as well. So thank you very much for your patience. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Mr. Poe. Please remain on the stage and take your seat on the stage. And now we'd like to welcome our moderator, Ms. Carrie Waring, and all the panelists to the stage for the discussion and Q&A session. 接下来邀请主持人以及所有的与谈人上台来进行对谈讨论，同时呢也回答大家的问题。在这边也提醒所有的来宾，如果您想要提问，请以英文来填写提问单，交给我们现场的工作人员。那么问题呢会统一的交由座谈的主持人来发问。Once again, if you have any question related to the discussed topics, please write them down on the question sheet in English and hand it to our staff. 那么接下来呢，我们就把时间交给主持人。Let's now hand the floor to our moderator, Ms. Carrie Waring.
Thank you very much. Now, we started the session today 10 minutes late, but we are going to finish on time, so we're going to treat this session as a quick-fire, 45-minute wake-up session to really think about and have some questions around some of the excellent presentations that we've heard from our panel. But we'd like to start with a question to you from the outset, because much of our discussion has been around how to enhance the effectiveness of boards of directors, and we've all recognised that independent directors are important to that. But the question is, what is the optimal proportion? So can we have the audience poll question, please, and let's see what the audience thinks in terms of what proportion of the board should be comprised of independent directors. Can we have the poll question, please? And where's the music? I'd ask for music. Okay, who's got a joke? Yay! Thank you. To the next audience poll so we can have a shorter response time. Okay, at least 1/3. So that certainly concurs with the ICGN's view. And it's important because we would expect at least 3 of the directors to be independent on the individual committees, whilst recognising that the majority independent directors are preferred in, as I said earlier, the US, UK and markets like Canada and Australia. But can I, as this is on independent directors, and Benson, you've done so much work in terms of promoting the importance of effective boards with the association. Is having a greater number of independents on boards here in Taiwan having any real effect? Is it changing the way in which businesses are being successfully promoted?
Thank you, Carrie. In Taiwan, we start to promote the independent director system since year 2002. So if you count back, we are like a young girl or a young boy, you know. It seems, from the appearance, look like an adult, but in fact, we still have a what you call inside thing need to be added. Okay, so from this perspective, also when we think we have 1,600 companies, so from different industry, different what you call the portfolio investment. I mean the structure of the investor. Also, so they have all this. We have about 3,000 of independent directors facing a different environment. But in general, I would like to say the inclusion of the independent director to the board does produce a positive impact to the board effective in general. We have, TCGA just recently have a survey we received about 420 response from independent director. and I just share the information with you. 97% of independent director, respond that they have sufficient information before the meeting. 60% of the independent directors say they were consulted, they were invited to discuss the major, major proposal before the board meeting. Then another 10% of independent directors responded that they have the experience that they vote differently from the proposal of the management. Okay, that's so I would like to say in general. And who contribute to this? I would like to say the first roadmap introduced by the Financial Supervisory Commission, from year 2003 to 7. That's a driving, forces for this achievement. And of course, the whole ecosystem contribute to this kind of achievement. Thank you.
Thank you, Benson. I'd be interested to hear your perspective, Leo, from an investment perspective. You talked earlier about how you analyze things like board quality and effectiveness, and I refer to how difficult that may be in some cases. But how are you doing this in practice?
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue for us is twofold. It's not, the number is fine, 1/3, but the key things, are they effective and do they speak out? In Taiwan we have a big problem with, we have a lot of people who are picked as independent directors because they're going to follow what the board wants. And then they may be independent, but they're not really doing what they're supposed to do. The second issue is, do you have people who are going to drive your business in the direction that you need to go? For example, if you're going to move in a direction where your company is going to be doing more international business, should you then not be looking, and using independent directors, should you not be then looking for independent directors who have that experience, rather than going for a local professor, which are common here in Taiwan? Nothing against professors for sure, but I'm just saying you should look to fill those positions with people who are going to move your company in the right direction. So that's more important to us than just the number.
Actually, that was one of the questions from Daniel Shi. Put your hand up. Don't be shy. So Daniel has actually asked the question, how do you team up companies that need the right independent directors, but where do you find the independent directors from? There isn't any network of a NED pool, if you like, an independent director pool. How do you match independent directors to the right company? I'm not sure if you have the answer to this, or Benson, or what actually.
Taiwan does have an independent director group, but maybe you.
Okay, this time let me use Chinese. Okay. 我想在台湾的环境之下，台湾算是一个不大的地方，那的确要找这个独立董事嘛，应该多方。刚刚我讲这怎么样广阔去找。以我个人的经验来讲，我现在服务的3家公司的独立董事呢，在我就任以前，董事长是不认识我的，不认识我。那我想他的一个 process， 他应该是透过专业的人员来介绍。在一种 engagement， 我讲说需要 engagement， 因为虽然都是专业人、好公司，可能好的独立董事的原料，但是呢，是不是适任这家公司，这个就需要一点约会这个就我刚刚提了，为什么要 engagement？ 那这中间比较重要就是说，可能双方要把相对的期待，刚刚我没有时间讲，就是说期待你期待我花多少时间，那你期待我承担什么责任？一般的董事之外承担什么责任？那你给我是什么？有没有保险？那大概是这个可以把它写下来。这个是比较先进国家，像英国，它就有这种 engagement， 甚至邀请他到董事会去参观一下，甚至看看董事会的记录，这样来找。那我想，这样的话可以避免所谓的 group think， 就是集体迷失了，因为大家都同样一个出身，可能就会有这种都想的方法是一样。因为董事会最重要就是做一个替公司做对的决定，那对的决定需要一点 discussion， 也需要一点 challenge， 需要从不同的角度来看。所以我想最重要就是说，公司要有这种心胸，就是说多广一点来看，广一点来看，谢谢。
A lot of the discussion earlier today has been around how do we go beyond form and more towards substance. And actually, one of the team from the audience, Tiffany Sun, has asked that question. So how can we encourage companies to adopt good governance standards rather than simply following the letter of the law? And what is it that our gatekeepers, our wonderful regulatory community, are doing to keep a check on this? So I wonder, Waracha, what your view might be on that.
The most important thing for driving good governance in companies is that they must see the why. They must see that good governance answer their why for their existing, for their doing business. I believe that in the market competition, most of the companies are doing things they are measured on a short-term basis. Their bonus depends on their annual performance and their yearly performance. So in that case, then they rush people to make profit, for the profit, short-term profit. And at least in Thailand, companies are normally paid in the base salary and bonus. They don't normally have the long-term share, so to drive them, to incentivize them for the long term. So in that case, it's hard to incentivize them to do it for long term. But if they have good structure and then they have good corporate vision for the long term, then they'll see that the good governance is to answer their business. It's not enough to do good for their own self, but it has to be good for the others as well. And if they want to do business that is good, that create values to their stakeholders, then they'll see that people in their board, within their family is not enough. We don't want, they need to have someone, some expert to join their team, so they should have the board that serve their purpose, not just to meet the letters of the law. I think that we have been asking companies to appoint independent directors for so long, and they just add in people who won't check on them too much. So, but if they see that this is a good board combination to serve their purpose, to help them achieve their purpose, then they bring in experts, and those are automatically independent, and then that will help them to meet their business and bring good governance to their team anyway.
Thank you. You know, this issue around substance over form is really important, and I think some of the examples I gave earlier in terms of the naming and shaming regimes which are being introduced at a government level but are sort of soft in the way they're being implemented are having a really effective transformation in the UK in terms of the quality of disclosures. So on the investor side, the lists of the individual investors are tiered in terms of the quality of their disclosure, and now on the company side you're seeing them being named and shamed if we're getting votes against, you know, remuneration reports or board diversity reports, and it's not a financial penalty, but I think in terms of the reputation of the company that's really important. But Stephen, I'd be really interested in your view on this in terms of, do you think we should have a slightly stronger enforcement regime here in Asia more generally? And I say this because I know I'm a fan of the CG Watch and Jamie Allen and the fabulous team at the ACGA, and it seems to me that enforcement comes up a lot in terms of whether or not it could be strengthened here in Asia. What is your view on that?
Thanks. This is a really difficult question because the culture in Asia is a little bit different from the rest of the world, in particular in relation to how the investors react to any mistreatment. Usually, the investors in Asia simply sell the share and then go away. Unlike in overseas firms like all these major buy-side firms like the fund houses, will really push the listed companies for changes, and then there's more about independent investors group that pushing for all these corporate governance changes. In Asia, there's a lack on that initiative coming out from the investors themselves. But of course, doesn't mean that the exchanges or the regulators in Asia haven't done anything on that yet. For example, like back in Hong Kong, the Hong Kong Stock Exchange has been issuing all these guidelines pushing all the listed firms to have more open dialogue with their shareholders in either the AGMs or other meetings. And equally, the regulators in Hong Kong also issue a voluntary guideline suggesting how the investors can approach the listed firms to obtain these informations. But so far, all this is still done on a much more on a low levels, I would say, it's voluntary basis rather than the approach you just asked about. So coming back to your questions, whether a slightly higher level of the regulations with more tools, I would say that probably may not be entirely appropriate at this point of time. The Asia is still going through a lot of the transitional educational phase. So what's appropriate for Asia stock market is that there must be a good educations on the investors first, that in case if they feel that they have been mistreated, they just don't walk away by selling the shares. They need to take it up. Either they complain or either they file all these issues with the regulators so that they can be built up on a corporate governance forces from the other side, pushing the listed firms to do the work. Then later on, if there has not been an improvement on all these behaviors, that probably would be the next step. Think about whether a tighter enforcement approaches should be adopted.
I just want to say, I think the companies themselves have to want to do it. And if Taiwanese companies know that they'll get different kinds of investors, institutional investors, larger investors, if they fulfill these requirements, they'll start to move in that direction. I think the stick is the law, as Benson was talking about. We need to have more carrots. And I think our companies and the asset owners need to do a lot more to provide those carrots and make it clear that, you know, we're not going to invest if these criteria aren't met. So hopefully companies will buy into that and understand that it is important.
And there's a lot of pressure on the carrots these days. It's quite a nice segue actually into the second priority that you have in your roadmap, which is all about empowering shareholders to effectively use their rights to engage with companies and to hold them to account for preserving and enhancing long-term corporate value. So can we go to the next audience question, which is all around the Stewardship Code signatories. Since the launch of the Stewardship Code in 2016 in Taiwan, has there been an increased trend in your engagements with either investors if you're a company or with companies if you're an investor in the audience? So that is the audience question. Has there been a change in engagement experiences since the code was launched 2 years ago? Music maestro. Is that, oh. Okay, well maybe we'll come back to that once we have the results. I'm going to assume that it said yes, and that most people think more engagement is taking place. Certainly that is the trend globally. But Leo, again, I'd like to ask you about this in terms of your engagements. I mean, what, 160,000 proposals voted on? That's some effort. I mean, you're the biggest asset manager in the world, but even you struggle, I know, in terms of resources. How can investors manage the public expectations on you to engage with companies, given the limited resources that you really have?
For us, it's an increasing obligation. You know, as I said in the beginning, corporate governance itself, the whole process is becoming more and more arduous. In the old days, you just made sure that there was transparency and the minority shareholders were protected. As we move into sustainability, it becomes much more difficult to assess that. That means you need to really engage with companies to understand whether they are taking steps that are in the interest of sustainability. For us, it's just a matter of getting more people and growing the teams. It becomes a more and more important part of our business, and I think that will only continue. And I think that trend will continue for the asset owners as well, for the regulators, for everyone. It's going to be more and more important as time goes on.
And I think your point about the asset owners is key, and most ICGN members are asset owners, and they themselves are under an awful lot of pressure these days from a regulatory perspective, particularly in Europe, to exercise their stewardship obligations and to ensure that the mandates they give to BlackRock and others adequately incorporate ESG and stewardship expectations in that. Actually, you did mention sustainability, and we absolutely must talk about it, because although it's extremely important to focus on the foundations of governance, as I said earlier, the report from the IPCC is really quite terrifying, and this is real. And how do companies engage with the issue of sustainability in terms of environmental, social, as well as governance pressures? There are ideas around taxing companies for their carbon emissions, for example. In France, a new requirement was brought on for investors under Article 173. They actually mandatorily have to disclose their carbon footprint. Can I ask Stephen and also Waracha, in terms of, from a regulatory perspective, do you envisage regulators stepping in to encourage the market to be more active in terms of sustainable finance and implementation? Waracha, perhaps I'll turn to you first.
I see the effort by the Financial Stability Board to put the climate change as one of the financial risk of the financial institutions, and ask that the companies disclose these factors as their risk and how they deal with it on the strategy, and have the metrics for the show the outcome of what have been done within the company. So these factors, we used to think that it's non-financial. It's good to do, but actually it poses risk to the company. So when institutional investors engage with company and ask for development on these factors of companies that help companies to be more alert on ESG factors. I have to say that in Thailand, the listed companies, we have like 700 listed companies. Foreign shareholders, foreign investors invest only in like the top 50 companies, 50, 60 companies. Thai institutional investors may invest in like 100 companies, and the rest, 500 to 600 companies, are mainly family-owned or smaller companies. So when we talk about the pursuing these ESG matters through investors, we have to focus a lot on like the foreign investors for big companies, and not to forget the major shareholders, family members of the smaller companies as well. Because we used to think that family companies tend to have less transparency, and it's not good in terms of governance structure. But actually, if you look at it in the long term, family companies are more engaged with the companies long term. So sometimes we find it easier for family companies to think about ESG and to handle the company to their next generation. So these ESG matters are important, and the investors' roles are very important in driving real CG in practice. But it's the different investors groups that we have to take care of them differently. And even the investors group, for European countries, the asset owners, you're talking about large pension funds. But in Thailand, these pension funds, we don't have the mandatory pension for normal employee. It's all voluntary. So if it's voluntary, that means each company has their own provident fund. they set up, they have their own committee. This committee, fund committee, they are like employees' representatives. They don't know how to invest, so they just look to negotiate for the lower fee from fund managers. So it's a lot of work to educate these fund managers, these fund committees in provident funds to think of their long-term, benefit to their employees. These are huge. There's another area that we have to work on for the asset management companies that they sell funds to their clients, Then most of them are part of financial institutions. We have better tax regime if you invest through funds. So these funds are set up and invest a lot in the deposits and short-term securities, debt securities. So they don't have so much guts to go for real long-term equity return for that. So it's a lot of development. So it's a whole development of the ecosystem that we needed.
We might learn from our friends here in Taiwan. It's pretty impressive, and Stephen, I'll come to you again in a moment, but the number of 336 companies having GRI, CSR type reports is really impressive, Benson. Can you tell us why have companies so readily adopted disclosure around ESG here in Taiwan?
OK， 我想这个是两个力量，一个是 pull， 一个 push。那我们在2018到2020的公司治理蓝图里面有两个跟这个有关的，一个就是未来公司治理评鉴会走向比较 qualitative， 不是光 quantity， 就是有一点质量的。质量的话第二个就是整合性报告 integrated reporting， 将来就是财务报告以外这些报告怎么比较透明一点。那这个是可以预期的。那再一个就是说，台湾的 Stewardship Code 早一点 Carry 有讲，已经91家，事实上现在已经98家 ，98 now。那我想这个是刚刚的起步，刚刚这个破的结果，大家有些知道，有些不知道，刚好一半一半哈。那可以感觉到，就是说这个东西这一股力量，因为台湾过去在外资来看台湾这些机构投资人的时候，他们用一个形容词叫 quiet， 很安静的。那有些甚至连基本的权利投票都是没去参加的。那现在来讲，我知道这一股因为也在鼓吹，所以越来越多来 sign in， 而且呢，我们采用的是 comply or explain 这种做法。所以既然 sign 以后呢，他就要慢慢做，这是一个 evolution。所以我想从公司的立场来谈，应该我们要大家注意这样的一个趋势。所以台湾的机构投资人将来会比较 active 来参与 engage 公司，来看看公司做得怎么样，将来是怎么样这样的概念，所以我们必要这种准备。所以我最先在 present 的时候有讲到我们这个 engagement stakeholder 的 engagement， 这个除了这一部分以外，当然刚刚讲的员工很多都需要这样的去做，所以董事会需要一个思考，说在这样的一个新的环境之下呢，我们应该做些什么样的东西来让公司呢能够 sustainable。OK， 谢谢。
I think it's interesting that you mentioned stakeholder engagement. It seems to be a common global theme in every market. Even in the UK, the new UK Corporate Governance Code now requires boards of directors to consider and to explain how they engage with the workforce, and they must adopt one of three options or provide an alternative, either appointing a designated non-executive director to the board, either setting up an advisory committee to the board, or appointing an employee to the board, so that the worker issues are taken into account. But I must say, whilst the duty of directors is to promote the success of the company for its members, taking in regard all of the other stakeholders, they must remain accountable to shareholders, because if they're not accountable to shareholders, who are they accountable to? So we mustn't forget that. That's my little bandwagon issue at the moment. Keeping on the sustainability theme, Stephen, and on regulation, one of the criticisms the investment community gets is that we're sending mixed messages in terms of what kind of reporting we expect from companies in terms of whether it's an integrated report, whether it's a GRI type report. How do you think regulators might engage or coordinate more effectively, if at all, to produce a global set of criteria, perhaps for directing conversations around sustainable investment?
Let me start off saying that the environmental, social, and governance, the ESG reporting, is high on the agenda items of many regulators on a global basis. One of the reasons, because look at one of the report issued by the Financial Stability Board, is they got a task force put up a recommendations on the climate-related financial disclosures. So even the G20 ministers and the regulators have feel the need to make more international disclosures related to all these climate. On that side is climate related, but definitely that need to be extended to cover all others social areas as well. So to me, this is the trend, a irreversible trend. There will be more and more standards coming out governing about the disclosures of all these informations which are dear to the heart of the investors, in particular to the institutional investors. So probably let me quote the Hong Kong experience of doing it as a starting point. The Hong Kong Stock Exchange has just revised its listing rules with a new appendix, Appendix 27, asking all the listed companies to make annual disclosures about their compliance of the ESGs. Basically, the guide covers mainly the environmental and the social areas, and that is further divided into, I think, the general disclosures and also those KPIs. The guidelines set up quite a number of the KPIs that the firms need to disclose. And not only disclose, for some firms, they do engage the accountants to check and report on the compliance of all these KPIs. So this is some additional steps the firms, the major listed firms, have done to discharge their social and environmental responsibilities. Basically, all these reports not only just give you the figures or their compliance statistics, but also talks about how they comply with it, how they see what are the issues and what sort of the responses they have been taken on. So there will be a very good understanding, not just on the number of the carbon emissions, but actually how the firm is seeing the things, how the firm is dealing with all these environmental or social issues. So we see that all these requirements will be put out by either the regulators or the exchanges, definitely throughout the whole Asia from time to time. So that would be just a transitional period. We just need some time. We'll catch up, but this is a issues that the regulators, the exchanges, and the listed companies are fully take law about it.
Thank you. Did you want to respond to that, Liam?
I just wanted to say, from BlackRock's perspective, ESG in particular is not ESG about ESG. For us, it is about long-term value creation for our clients. If you talk about ESG initiatives in your company that have nothing to do with creating value for your shareholders, we're not interested in. Because A, we don't believe it's really going to make a difference, because I don't think you can believe in it that much if you're not getting value from it. But B, it's not really benefiting anything. The benefit each company has is the E and the S and the G that are specifically related to that company and specifically related into creating long-term value for that company. So again, ESG is not just, we recycle the cups in our boardroom. I mean, that's great and you should, but that's not going to make a difference.
Do we have any questions from the audience? I'm conscious that we've had a couple of questions brought through, but do stand up and grab a mic if you'd like to ask a question. I'd like to also turn to our third and final audience poll question, which is actually just about, what's it about? It's about which factor has the highest impact in driving long-term company success. So this is looking at more of the traditional aspects of corporate governance, so board quality, KPIs and compensation, investor engagement, voting, board evaluation, or a really strong regulatory disclosure regime. Which single one do you think, if you had to choose, would have the biggest impact? It's a tough one. And while we're waiting, panel, the final question to you all: what keeps you awake at night? What keeps you awake at night? No, I need to get some glasses. Would you like to? It's board diversity. Oh, I like that. That's great. We need more women on boards. It's not just about women, obviously, board diversity. So Ms. Pan has asked a very good question around what are the specifications for independent directors in foreign markets? I mean, most criteria prescribed for independent directors are either listed in the corporate governance codes, or in the case of the US, it's the New York Stock Exchange listing rules. And can independent directors be the chairman of the company in foreign markets? Benson, what would your view be on that? Criteria for independent directors.
OK， 我先前有稍微分享一下，因为台湾我们从事公司治理才10几年，像一个年轻的还在成长之中，所以呢，刚刚也有来宾谈到，就是说我们可能本地呢很多教授都当这个独立董事，这个比例是比先进国家多一点。那以美国来讲呢，应该是90%是从企业界出来，所以因为在董事会运作，当然你各方面的专家，但是如果是你有知道这种 business 的一个运作这个东西呢，可能会更有效率。所以这个在先进国家为什么说比较多是从企业界出来的一个这样的一个道理。那台湾我认为，因为未来也是会往这方面来发展，我会一直往这方面来发展。那发展的话呢，就是说还在发展之中。所以呢，我们治理协会在这一部分的一个角色也扮演了一定的角色。所以我们对这个像出任的董事的一个训练，希望呢他还没有就任独立董事之前呢，应该有的。虽然可能他是法律专家，可能他是会计专家，那其他董事会应该有的，比如说策略面，比如说内控面，比如说风险管理面，比如说沟通人际的沟通，比如说决策这样的一个东西呢，希望他有一个全面的一个了解。这样的话呢，是不是会将来呢对董事会的一个实际的效能会比较有帮忙啊？这是我的一个看法。所以台湾这一方面还在学习之中。
Thank you. Waracha, did you want to respond to that? Sorry, you were looking at me, so I didn't know. Should we just go to the killer question then? What is it that keeps you awake at night?
Awake at night, as a SEC, facing all the technology transformation, I think this is the most important issue that we're facing at the moment. We know that our listed companies are also they're faced with this problem. So how can we integrate governance into their business? How can they see that, how to help them to see that what we are looking for is to create their value, their long-term value. It's not just to follow the rules and how to, we have seen like Uber, where we used to have the transportation authority that give license to taxi companies, so that taxi companies will have good drivers and respect all the etiquette and conduct. And then they came Uber, where user of the cars can ride the cars and grade the drivers, and by doing that, the driver have to do it to drive well by themselves, so that to get good ratings without the regulator having to tell them to drive well. So we wish that we could provide the listed companies with the environment, either through disclosure or through enabling the self-assessments or whatsoever, to help them to go through this process. And we like to see them to do it by the heart, not by regulation. The regulations should be used only when we can enforce, and we should enforce only when it's wrong. And we have to do it anyway because they are always wrongdoer. But most of our people, hopefully, are not bad people. They are good people, and they're willing to improve for the better. So we like how to support them. That's keep me awake at night.
Thank you. Stephen? What keeps you awake at night?
Okay, thanks for the questions. The answer is very simple. If my wife does not sleep, she will keep me awake at night. But that's the joke part. But a bit more serious part is about the financial outlook. Very strange. In 1997, we have the Asian financial crisis, and then 2008, we got the global financial crisis. So it looks like it happens around every 10 years. Now we are in 2018. So what next? This is probably some things that keep many of us awake at night. As a regulator or as an industry practitioners, the only advice is sit tight, do whatever you can, manage your risk, and prepare for anything that might happen.
I asked the same question to Hiro Mizuno in June, the CIO of GPIF, which is $1 trillion of assets under management, the biggest asset owner, and he answered the same way. What keeps you awake at night, Leo?
Yeah, for me, it's related to what something Stephen said earlier. I'm nervous about the short-term attitude of investors, and I think a lot of these issues would be addressed if people took a more long-term approach. I think even some of the economic instability we're seeing now is because people flee the minute they hear some noise in the news or whatever. I think if people took a long-term view, looked at the companies they invest in, made sure they were good companies addressing these issues, they would be feeling more secure now, and they wouldn't flee as quickly. We would have a more stable market, and we would address a lot of the ESG issues that we're talking about today.
And Benson, what keeps you awake at night? Wake up. You're always awake.
我这个年纪啊，想要去尿尿就会 wake up。那刚刚那个 Steven 也有讲说，太太如果 wake up， 你也会 wake up 啊。因为我基本上也不是政府机关的官员哦，所以就当然碰到比较重大的议案，在董事会要讨论比较重大的议案，你可能会在上面思考，到底是应该是怎么样去 approach 这个事情，尤其是说你可能有不同的意见的时候，应该怎么样去 approach， 这个可能也会让我 wake up。谢谢。
Good. So what keeps me awake at night is my babies, my girls, they're 8 and 9, and all of the things that we've been talking about is how do we ensure that our generation makes a safe and sustainable world for them when they're 18, 20, 30 years old. That's what keeps me awake at night, because we're really not doing enough and we really need to be doing more in terms of thinking for the long term. But let me take the opportunity to thank the panel. It's been really fascinating. Thank you very much, and it's been great to have all your questions, so thank you.
Thank you, everyone, especially our moderator for moderating this session for us. And once again, thank you to our panelists.